I told her my name once, and it was not the one written on any wanted paper that could get her hurt for knowing it. My name is Silas Merrow, though for 11 years most of Wyoming territory had known me by a different one entirely. The one that traveled ahead of me down the telegraph wire faster than any horse could carry a man, arriving in a town sometimes a full season before I did. I was 34 years old that summer, and I had made my living doing the kind of work that respectable men hire and then pretend they never spoke to you about. The kind of work that leaves a man with steady hands, a quiet voice, and almost no one left who calls him by the name his mother gave him. If Josephine Hale ever learned who I actually was before I found a way to tell her myself, I stood to lose considerably more than her good opinion. I stood to bring the particular kind of attention to her father's homestead that men like me carry behind us the way a storm carries weather. And in that part of the territory, in that particular summer, attention was the one thing a small homestead bordering Emmett Blackwood's range could least afford. I did not know that yet, riding into Larkin that August afternoon looking for nothing more complicated than an old road. I only knew I was tired in a way that had stopped being about the miles. I rode into Larkin on the strength of a rumor and 11 years of not asking. The rumor was that the old Merrow spread, the one that burned to the foundation stones the summer I was 23, still had its gate standing at the north end, half fallen but standing, and that the road to it ran somewhere east of the town proper through country I no longer recognized. I had left Wyoming territory the week after the fire with nothing but a horse, my father's revolver, and a grief I did not yet have a name for, and I had not been back since, not once in 11 years, though the not going back had cost me something I only understood much later, a kind of homesickness that had nowhere left to be homesick for. Larkin had grown considerably from the crossroads I remembered. It had a bank now, and a proper hotel, and a general store with glass windows, and it had, most relevantly to my purposes, the particular quiet that falls over a street when men recognize a face they have only ever seen on paper. I felt it happen within a block of riding in, conversations trailing off, a man in the barbershop window going very still, the telegraph operator glancing up from his key with an expression that told me the wire had done its work before I had. This was, in its way, ordinary to me. I had learned to read a town's fear the way other men read weather, and I had learned that fear generally kept people from doing anything foolish, which was, in fact, the entire point of the reputation, whether or not I had ever asked for it. I stopped at the edge of the street where the road forked, uncertain which branch led east, and it was Josephine Hale who was standing there with a mule and a wagon half loaded with feed sacks, the only person on that street who looked at me the way you look at a stranger asking a plain question rather than the way you look at a rumor come to life. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm looking for the old road east, out past the Second Creek crossing. There was a ranch out that way once." She looked at me, really looked, the particular direct assessment of someone deciding what kind of person they were dealing with from the ground up, without reference to anything she might have already heard. "The Merrow place," she said, "burned a long time back. Nobody's out that way now but the wind and Blackwood's cattle grazing where they shouldn't." "Merrow," she said, easy as anything, with no idea that the word she'd just spoken was also, in a manner of speaking, sitting on the horse in front of her. "You knew the family?" I asked, and heard my own voice come out steadier than I expected, given the particular strangeness of asking a stranger about my own dead. "Before my time," she said. "My father might remember them better. There was a fire, and some talk it wasn't only weather that started it, though nobody in this town has ever cared to say that too loud, on account of who owns most of the grazing land it would embarrass." She studied me another moment, this careful, undecided study, and then said, without any particular drama, "You want, I can show you the road myself. I'm headed that direction anyway to check my father's north fence. I want to be honest about what happened in me in that moment, because it was the first genuinely unguarded thing anyone had offered me in longer than I cared to count." She had no idea what she was offering to ride beside, and I understood, with the particular cold clarity a man gets about his own worst instincts, that the honorable thing was to decline, thank her, and find the road on my own. I did not do the honorable thing. I said I'd be obliged, and fell in beside her wagon, and told myself I would correct the situation at the first reasonable opportunity, which was a lie I believed for considerably longer than I should have. Leas Hale, when we reached the Hale homestead an hour later so Joe could set down her feed sacks before we rode on, looked at me the way a father looks at a stranger arriving beside his daughter's wagon, carefully, thoroughly, without hostility but without much warmth either, the particular neutral appraisal of a man reserving judgment until he had more information to judge with. Strangers looking for the old Marrow place, Joe told him, swinging down from the wagon seat. I said I'd show him the road since I'm headed to the north fence anyway. Elias looked at me a moment longer than the introduction strictly required. Long way to come for a burned foundation, he said. It was not quite a question, and it was not quite an accusation, and I understood that Elias Hale had spent enough years on hard land to have developed an instinct for men who arrived carrying more than they said, and that instinct was, at that moment, working exactly as it should. Family business, I said, which was true in every sense that mattered and revealed nothing at all, and Elias considered that answer, weighed it against whatever else he was weighing, and nodded once, the particular economical nod of a man deciding to let a thing go for now, rather than because he'd stopped wondering about it. The ride out to the old Marrow place took the better part of that afternoon, along a road grown over in places where nobody had bothered to keep the wheel ruts clear, through country that had changed enough in 11 years that I found myself relying on landmarks I hadn't known I still carried. A particular twist in the creek, a stand of cottonwoods my father had always said marked the property line, though the line itself had long since stopped meaning anything to anyone but me. Joe talked easily as we rode, telling me about her father's homestead, 160 acres claimed under the Homestead Act 9 years back, proved up the hard way through drought and one bad winter that had cost them half their cattle, and I found myself listening with the particular attention of a man who has forgotten what it sounds like when someone talks to you simply because the talking itself is pleasant, not because they want something. "You're quiet," she observed, somewhere past the second creek crossing, not unkindly, just noting it the way she seemed to note most things. "I've had less practice at conversation than most," I said, which was, again, entirely true and entirely evasive, and she gave me a sideways look that told me she'd noticed the particular shape of my honesty without yet having the pieces to know what it was hiding. We reached the gate at the north end of the old Marrow place in the low gold light of late afternoon, and it was exactly as the rumor had promised. Half fallen but standing, weathered gray wood that had once been painted, the M my father had carved into the crossbeam still visible if you knew to look for it. Beyond it, the foundation stones of the house sat scattered and blackened in tall grass that had grown up through what used to be the kitchen floor, and I sat my horse at that gate for longer than conversation required, looking at the particular nothing that 11 years and one bad night had made of everything my family had built. "You knew them," Joe said. It was not a question this time. She had gone very still beside me, watching my face rather than the ruin in front of us, and I understood that whatever careful mask I had been maintaining since Larkin had slipped somewhere in the last several minutes, enough for a woman with good instincts to read what was underneath it. "I knew them," I said. "I was there the night it burned." I looked at the blackened stones a while longer before I found the rest of it. My mother didn't get out. My father died 3 days later from the smoke, though the doctor at the time called it his heart, which was also true, in its way. I was 23. I left the territory the week after, and I have not been back since, not once, in 11 years. The particular silence Joe held after that was not the silence of a person searching for something comforting to say. It was the silence of someone doing careful arithmetic, matching a name she had heard once or twice against a face she had spent an afternoon riding beside. And I watched the exact moment the arithmetic resolved, watched her expression shift from simple sympathy into something more complicated, more careful. "Marrow," she said slowly. "Silas Marrow." She looked at me with new eyes, and I braced for what I had learned, over 11 years, to expect in that particular look. The fear, or the fascination, both equally unbearable in their own ways. "I've heard that name," she said. "Attached to some ugly business, 3 counties over, and one bad winter up near the Montana line." "Some of it's true," I said, because I had promised myself, riding into Larkin that morning, that if this moment ever came, I would not lie to her about it, whatever else I managed to get wrong. Most of what's attached to that name is true enough in its facts, and wrong in every particular that matters. I never once did that work for pleasure, and I never once did it to a man who hadn't already done considerably worse to someone who couldn't fight back. But I won't stand here and tell you my hands are clean, because they're not, and you deserve better than a man telling you a comfortable lie at a graveyard gate. I opened my mouth to tell her the rest of it, the part I had not said out loud to another living soul in 11 years, the reason the Marrow Ranch had burned at all, and the words did not come, because the sound of a second rider approaching down the overgrown road reached us both at the same moment, and Joe's hand went instinctively to the small knife at her belt, and I turned to see a man in an expensive gray coat sitting a fine black gelding at the edge of the old property line, watching us with the particular cold patience of a man who has been informed of exactly where to find what he was looking for. Emmett Blackwood had aged considerably in 11 years, his hair gone fully white, his face settled into the particular soft cruelty of a man who has never once had to answer for anything. "Silas Merrow," he said, and there was no surprise in it at all, which told me everything I needed to know about how quickly the telegraph wire had done its work that morning. "I confess I did not expect you to come back to this particular gate. Most men who lost what you lost prefer to keep their distance from the reminder." "Mr. Blackwood," Joe said, with the careful neutral courtesy of a homesteader's daughter addressing the largest rancher in the county, though I could see something harder working underneath it. "Miss Hale," he said, barely glancing at her, his attention fixed on me with the particular stillness of a man deciding how much a situation was worth managing. "I understand your father's homestead has been having some difficulty with the North Creek running low this summer. I understand my grazing rights upstream have made that difficulty considerably worse than the drought alone would account for." He looked between the two of us, and something in his expression sharpened. "I would hate for that difficulty to become permanent, on account of complications neither of us particularly wants." I understood, in that moment, exactly what kind of threat had just been made, dressed in the particular polite language men like Blackwood always used, and I understood, with the cold clarity of 11 years' hard-won experience, that the fire that killed my family had very likely been set for precisely the same reason: water, and grazing land, and a smaller family in the way of a larger one's ambition, dressed up afterward as an accident nobody in this town had ever cared to question too loudly. "You set that fire," I said. It was not quite a question either. The way Elias's earlier remark had not quite been an accusation, and Blackwood's face did something small and careful, and entirely confirming, the particular tell of a man who has spent 11 years believing no one left alive would ever say the words out loud to his face. "That's a serious thing to say to a man in his own county," he said, and did not deny it, which was, in its own way, the loudest confirmation he could have offered. I did not answer him immediately. Jo stood very still beside me, her hand still resting near the knife at her belt, watching this exchange with the particular focus of someone recalculating everything she thought she understood about who the dangerous man in this conversation actually was. "I came back for a burned foundation and an old gate," I said finally. "I did not come back looking for you, Mr. Blackwood, and I would have left this county the same way I found it, quiet and finished with the whole business, if you hadn't just threatened a homestead that has nothing to do with either of us." I looked at him steadily. "You should think carefully about whether you want to change my mind about staying." Blackwood held my gaze a long moment, weighing, the way men in his position always weighed, the cost of a threat against the cost of backing away from one, and whatever he saw in my face in that moment was apparently sufficient, because he turned his horse without another word and rode back the way he'd come, leaving the particular silence behind him that follows any man who has just discovered the ground under him is less solid than he believed. "You could have gotten yourself killed just now," Joe said, once the sound of his horse had faded, "or gotten me killed standing next to you." "I know it," I said. "I should apologize for that, and I do. I told myself riding in this morning that I'd find the road, look at what was left, and ride on before anyone in this county had cause to connect me to anything. I did not expect to find you standing at that fork, and I did not expect to want to keep talking to you past the first mile, and both of those things happening at once is entirely my failure of judgment, not yours." "That's not an apology," Joe said. "That's a man explaining his reasons for something he doesn't actually regret." I looked at her for a long moment in the gold last light coming down over the burned foundation of my family's house. "No," I said, "I don't suppose it is. I stayed in that county 3 more weeks, longer than any reasonable accounting of the danger justified. And I want to be honest that most of those weeks were spent finding excuses to ride past the Hale homestead on my way to somewhere else. Excuses Joe saw through without ever once calling me on them directly, which was its own kind of mercy. I helped Elias walk his north fence, the same section Joe had been checking the day we met, and found the creek running low exactly as Blackwood had implied, a diversion dug upstream that had nothing to do with drought and everything to do with a rancher testing how much pressure a small homestead could absorb before it broke. The dark evening came 10 days later, when Blackwood's foreman rode onto the Hale land with 2 other men and informed Elias, with the particular false courtesy such men always used, that the Hale water allotment was being reconsidered in light of certain complications, and that Elias might want to consider whether holding on to 160 acres was worth the trouble it was currently attracting. I was not there when it happened, I heard about it from Joe that evening, her voice carefully controlled in the particular way of someone who has decided crying will not solve the actual problem, and I felt something in me go very cold and very still. The particular stillness I had not felt in 11 years and had hoped never to feel again. I should leave, I told her, that same night, standing at her father's gate in the dark. Every day I stay, I make your family a bigger target than the water dispute alone would make you. Blackwood doesn't want the water. He wants me gone, and he's decided your family is a convenient place to apply pressure until that happens. That's your decision to make, Joe said, but it's not the only one available. My father spent 9 years proving up this land against worse odds than one old rancher's temper, and I have spent this whole summer watching a man who supposedly can't be trusted help fix my father's fence without being asked, and ride 12 miles out of his way twice a week for no reason he's ever honestly explained to me. She looked at me steadily in the dark. I don't need you to leave to protect me, Silas. I need you to decide whether you're staying because it's right, or running because it's easier, because those are two very different men, and I'd like to know which one is standing at my father's gate. I did not answer her right away, because the honest answer required admitting something I had spent 11 years avoiding admitting to myself, let alone to another person standing close enough to see my face while I said it. I came back to this county to look at a burned foundation and grieve something I never let myself grieve properly, I said finally. I did not come back looking for a reason to stay. I found one anyway, and I have spent 3 weeks trying to talk myself out of it on the grounds that I'm not the kind of man a woman like you should want standing at her gate. I looked at her. I was wrong about that, not about the hands. The hands are what they are, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I was wrong that it disqualifies me from wanting something honest, if you're willing to consider it. The confrontation with Blackwood came 4 days after that, not with guns, though I want to be truthful that I expected it might, but with the particular quiet violence of paperwork. Elias and I rode into Larkin together and laid out, in front of the county land office, and 2 men from the Territorial Water Commission Joe had written to, without telling either of us, exactly what upstream diversion had been doing to a homestead's legal allotment, backed by testimony from 3 other small ranchers who had been too afraid of Blackwood to speak up until someone else went first. Blackwood did not go to prison. Men like him rarely did, in that territory, in that decade. But the Water Commission ordered his diversion removed, and the story of an old fire and an old grievance, finally spoken out loud in a public land office, did more damage to his standing in that county than any bullet could have managed, which was, I came to understand, its own kind of justice. Quieter than the kind I'd spent 11 years delivering for other men's money. I did not go back to that other life. I want to say that plainly, because it matters more than anything else in this accounting. I stayed in that county, worked Elias's land alongside him through that difficult summer, and the 2 that followed, and married Josephine Hale the spring after the Water Commission's ruling, in a ceremony her father gave away with visible relief and considerably more warmth than his first careful appraisal of me had suggested he was capable of. We built a house eventually on the old Marrow foundation, the same blackened stones cleared and reset into a new footing, because Joe said there was no sense leaving good stone to waste on grief when it could hold up a roof instead. And I found, when I finally moved into that house, that grief and gratitude could occupy the same rooms without either one crowding out the other. On an evening some years later, sitting on that new porch with Joe beside me and the old gate still standing at the north end of the property, weathered now past even its previous weathering, she asked me once, not for the first time, whether I missed the man I used to be. I miss knowing exactly what I was for, I told her, which had at least been simple. But I don't miss being him. I looked at the gate, and the M my father had carved still faintly visible in the crossbeam if you knew where to look. I like this man better. He asks directions instead of assuming he already knows the way. She took my hand without saying anything else, and the Wyoming evening came down slow and gold over land that had finally, after 11 years, stopped only being a place I'd lost, and become instead a place I'd found my way back to.